So as I said in a previous lecture, we'll use the CircleCI for continuous integration and continuous delivery. You should navigate to the circleci.com website, and then there is a sign up button. And you can easily sign up with your GitHub account, which you should already have because we created that in one of the previous lectures. And after you create an account and give permissions to access your repositories, we will go back and create settings for our Symfony 4 project. After logging in with GitHub to CircleCI, you should have a list of your repositories when you go to the Add Projects. So you have to find the project with the Symfony 4 app and click Setup Project. So we will have the project running on Linux, and it should be in PHP language, and as the next step says, we'll have to create a .circleci folder inside our project and add a config YAML file. That will be our project definition for the CircleCI. There is a sample config file here, but we'll just create our own and we'll explain what all those settings mean and what do they do. So we are back inside our project, and as I said, we need to create a .circleci folder, and inside it create a config YAML file. That file will have to specify what version of CircleCI we'd like to use. The current one is version 2, so specify that. And this file has so-called jobs. So jobs is individual processes that try to build your machine and do something with it. And our first job would be to actually build the machine. We need to specify the working directory. Let it be home micropost. And each of those jobs need to specify on what kind of machine it will run and what type of machine setup you'd like. We'll specify to use Docker, and we need to tell it what image it should use. If you do not know what Docker is, it's basically very similar to Vagrant machines, but it just works differently. So we need to choose one of the pre-created images of the Docker, and on the CircleCI website there are many pre-built Docker images which already contain PHP. You can choose one that suits you best. We should use the most recent one for PHP because that's the version of PHP we have installed on our virtual server. But if you plan to work with any older version of PHP or new one pops up after this course is released, you are free to choose a different one. So we'll use PHP 7.2.4. So this specific image already has Apache with Node installed. Next, we'll have to specify some environment variables, the same we did on our virtual server. So for the test run, because this job would be responsible for running our tests, we need a test environment. We need to specify the database URL. And with the database URL, we'll need the username and password and the database name. So that means that we would like MySQL to be set up, but we'll get back to that in a moment. And we need a couple of other variables that we have, like mailer from and mailer URL. These are required because our app needs them. So you need to specify something. And next we'll add another image, which would be CircleCI MySQL version 5.7. And this will actually spin up two machines, one with the PHP with Apache and the second one would be with the MySQL. Here we'll also need some environment variables, and they would be MySQL root password and MySQL database, which would be micro post. And actually those environment variables have to be called this way because this is what this pre-created Docker image expects. So this is just a machine that will contain only MySQL, and by passing these environment variables you can tell it what's the root password for the database and what database that you'd like to create. And just note that we are using the same values as we use for the database URL for our app. So after defining the machines that should be spin up for our test run, we need to define steps. And this means what should be done on each of those machines. So the first step is to check out. This is the name of one of the magic steps of CircleCI, which will just tell it to check out the repository to which this config file is connected. And since we define the working directory as micropost, that's the directory to which the code would be checked out from Git. Next, we add another entry, which is called run, and run can have a name, so you will see some meaningful description of what happens. We can call it install PHP MySQL, and the command that will be the actual command line to execute. And we would like the PHP MySQL extension to be installed because the default one with PHP is not installed. Another command that we'd like to create is wait for MySQL. And that's because we are spinning up two machines. So before running next commands, we would want to be sure that the Docker image with MySQL was set up, run, and we can connect to MySQL. That's the address of MySQL. So this command will make this process wait for the MySQL server to actually start. Next step would be to update Composer. Then we would like to actually install dependencies. So we'll call Composer install, prefer dist, as we do not want the development dependencies to be installed. And the final step is to run any migrations. So setting up commands like that would allow us also to create some functional tests because the database would be ready to use. So we can create all kinds of tests and then they will be able to run in this separate environment, which will be prepared each time we run the tests. So to run migrations, we need to run php bin console doctrine migrations migrate, set the environment to test, and we have to run it with no interaction because by default these commands ask us to confirm, and there's no way we can interact with this console because this has to be automated. Alright, so we have a job set up. The config file is ready, so we should be able to commit this, and after the commit, the job on the CircleCI should be automatically started, and we would see if our tests do pass. But we will do that in the next lecture.